Well, hello everybody and welcome inside UNC Charlotte, where today we're going to have a conversation about the weather, winter weather, and more specifically adverse winter weather. And we're joined by Chris Gonyar, who is with the Emergency Management Office here on campus. Chris, to get started in this first of what will be a series of discussions, let's talk a little bit about what winter is like here in Charlotte, and setting up that thought with the idea that I think we all understand that here on campus and in the Charlotte region, we are in a place where there are lots of people from lots of places. So let's talk very specifically about what winter is in Charlotte, realizing that for some folks, you say, well, I've certainly experienced worse, but as we'll discuss, there are reasons why what is winter in Charlotte can be pretty tough.
Well, thank you for having me, and I think you're absolutely right. One of the first questions that's asked of me when I say I live in Charlotte, North Carolina is, oh, you guys don't get any snow in the winter. And we do, in fact. Typically we get about 2 to 3 what I would call adverse winter weather events per year. That could be some measurable amount of snow or ice, or some relatively extended period of, unseasonably cold weather. Typically we get about 4 inches of snow per year, snowfall per year. That's over about the last 30 years. And one of the things that I think is interesting about Charlotte, and you alluded to it, is that what constitute adverse winter weather, or a difficult adverse winter weather situation for us, is far different than what constitutes a difficult adverse winter weather event in some other parts of the country. So typically we see most of our snowfall between the months of January and March. So it's a relatively short window.
When you said 4 inches per year,
Mm-hmm.
Some folks think, oh, well, a year can be, October to May
Sure.
in other parts of the country, but very short period usually.
Yes, typically. Earliest snowfall on record is October into November. Latest, I think we've had one sort of traceable snowfall event that occurred in April, but really it's a very tight window of when we would see that heavier snowfall getting us up to the 4 inches or so. Yeah.
All right. Well, here on campus, we have a significant number of students who live on campus, but we have an even greater number of students and faculty and staff who come to campus each day by vehicle or by public transportation. What across the spectrum of the folks who are part of the UNC Charlotte community constitutes being prepared for winter weather? And no matter how good we are in thinking that's a great idea, how many times does that first snow and ice come and we don't have the scraper in our car, that kind of thing? But what kinds of things do we advise and remind in a friendly way everybody who's part of UNC Charlotte to do to be prepared for winter?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's being aware of the situation and what's going on. I think one of the other things when we talk about sort of the differences between Charlotte and where we're located geographically that's different from places where people may come from, is that a lot of times we are right on that snow, ice, rain line. So where you might see the northern part of the region or the county getting a cold rain, the southern part might be getting a heavy snow, and sort of everything in between. Right. So understanding that, I think the conditions where you're at currently could be far different than the conditions where you're going.
That's sometimes an issue for the folks on campus, as they might see the local weather on television, weather reports, and they're seeing snow, and it's being characterized as Charlotte is being hit by snow, but it's actually nowhere near campus, or or the way Charlotte works, it's 5 miles from campus, but we don't get anything, and sometimes the opposite happens too. So
yeah, absolutely. I think from my perspective, it takes a decent amount of snow to really start to be a problem, even here in Charlotte. I think if you start to see over about 5 inches of snow accumulation in one event, that would be when we'd start to see some more major type issues. Really, the biggest problem for us is ice. A 1/4 inch of ice is when you start to see down tree limbs, you start to see power lines down, power loss or power outages, treacherous roads, etc. So I wouldn't say that we in this area handle snow very easily, because again, I think it's any type of accumulation in snow or ice is difficult, but it takes the threshold for snow is much higher. Any sort of amount of accumulation in ice is a serious problem for us.
And you talk about how we handle it. There's how we handle it on campus. There's how it's handled in the area surrounding campus, whether it be Mecklenburg County or in the city of Charlotte or in Cabarrus County. But we are in the southeast, and so we're not talking about municipalities or even a campus that has the resources to deal with similar situations that are maybe more routine in other parts of the country. So what that is something I assume you would say that would be important for people to keep in mind.
It is, and I think that leads right into one of the things that we're trying to do from the Office of Emergency Management as we sort of rebuild some of our outreach and marketing and training materials. Is we really want to focus more on the impacts of the adverse winter weather events as opposed to the event. So instead of worrying about, are we going to get 3 inches of snow, or are we going to get 6 inches of snow, or are we going to get a trace of ice, I think we need to really think about what the impacts of that possible event may be. So is it a power outage, or is it treacherous roads, is it extended periods of cold, and prepare for those things as opposed to the small difference between if we get 3 inches of snow and 6 inches of snow.
So as we move forward in our series of conversations about adverse weather, we'll talk a little bit more about the impacts on the campus community and what that means, for instance, to class schedules and work schedules and that kind of thing. But let's just touch briefly on some ideas for more information, where people can go, and maybe use adverse weather as a way for some folks to familiarize yourself with the fact that your office is here on campus and some of the things you do. Where do we go?
Yep. So the website that we're working on sort of rebuilding and building out our outreach and marketing materials is emergency at .uncc.edu, and then /Niner Ready. And that would be where we would have information on preparedness for adverse winter weather. We'd have frequently asked questions. We have a description of kind of what winter weather in our area means and what some of the impacts might be as the campus changes kind of our operational conditions statuses. Additionally, we also have some information on building a kit, which I would say is goes hand in hand with being aware of the event and what's going on. So knowing, when snow or ice is supposed to start and when it might end and how long it's going to go. I really can't say enough about building a kit, throwing it in your trunk, and being prepared to be self-sufficient for some period of time. If we could learn anything from what happened back in Atlanta a few years ago, it's that, it doesn't take a large event to shut down a city and strand people on an interstate. It just takes a lot of people trying to get out of the city at once, having a few larger trucks get stuck on the interstate, and then people are spending the night in their car. So throw a bag in your trunk with warm clothes, hat, gloves, jacket, some water, some snacks and food. And really take the first step to kind of that individual preparedness is really critically important.
Great. Well, that's all good advice, and it's all good introductory material as we begin a series of discussions on adverse winter weather and how we handle it here at UNC Charlotte. So we thank our guest, Chris Gonyar, and we want you to stick with us here inside UNC Charlotte for much more to come. And Chris, again, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.